Merry Christmas, Grace Chapel family. It's December 1st, 2022, and this is the beginning of our Christmas Advent blog, or video blog, really, that we're going to share with you. And over the next 24 days leading up to Christmas Eve, the pastors from the church are going to be sharing with you just a few devotional thoughts for you to enjoy each morning from the book, The Dawn of Redeeming Grace. And these books are actually available at the church if you'd like to read along each day. And part of our motivation for doing this is really for the purpose of remembering that Jesus is central, the supremacy of Christ in Christmas, that we remember what it's really all about, and we can do that kind of all together. Have you ever opened Christmas presents and there's so much wrapping paper on the floor that you can't even see the floor anymore, and you inadvertently throw away a gift you just received and you have to go back out to the trash and dig it out? Sometimes I feel that way with Jesus, honestly. The cultural pressure, the demands that come, and you begin to just think, man, I've got to somehow, find Jesus in the midst of all of the craziness and busyness of Christmas. And so this is a way for us to keep Jesus central, but also for us to operate in unity as a church. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 2, the Bible says, the Apostle Paul says that you would be of the same mind, that you would think the same. And so by doing this, devotion together, by being in these video moments together, we're kind of got to think the same about Christmas. Just remember what it's really all about. And so the Bible now, we turn to Matthew chapter 1, and that's really what this book is going to do, is lead us through Matthew 1, through Matthew 2, and the birth of Jesus. And it starts in the most interesting way, right? Like there's a large genealogy that's included there. Charles Dickens started his famous book, A Tale of Two Cities, in a sort of a classic opening, right? It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. He goes on to say, it was the season of light, it was the season of darkness, it was the spring of hope, and it was the winter of despair. And so when you turn to Matthew chapter 1 and the opening here of this book, it's really that's what's going on in Israel. It's the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times because the Messiah, the promised one, has arrived, which is why the genealogy is included. This is the one that was promised to Abraham, promised to David, and so he's here. And so it's the best of times. It's also the worst of times because Israel is in a mess. Like you go back and read in Malachi and how the Old Testament ends, and there's 400 silent years in between. There's that one little blank piece of paper between the Old Testament and the New Testament. There's 400 years there. And as we see at the end of Malachi, like the spiritual leaders are not leading the people well, the families are in disarray, they're full of greed. Sounds honestly like today in many ways, a time of spiritual decline. And so right in the middle of that darkness, here comes the light of the world, here comes Jesus. And what does he come to do? He comes to rescue, he comes to save, he comes as the light of the world. And so while we turn to the opening of the Gospel of Matthew, we see that the promised one has arrived. So there is indeed, as Charles Dickens said, a spring of hope. And that's when you begin to read in the Gospels what you should be looking for. The hope has arrived. It reminds me of Galatians chapter 4, verses 4 to 5. It says this, "But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who are under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons." This is just so good. Remember when you're waiting for Christmas and you just can't wait? It feels like forever when you're a kid. When you're an adult, it feels like it just goes so fast. When you're a kid, the month of December is just as slow as it can be. Like you just can't wait for the big day to get there, right? And then it finally comes and it just seems to go so fast. Well, when we think of Christmas, sometimes you think, oh, those people, they waited 400 years and they just couldn't wait for the Messiah to come. But then here he comes at just the right time. For what purpose? For redemption. And that's why this is called the Dawn of Redeeming Grace. Jesus came to bring redemption. And so as Ferguson writes, he says this, so you could say at the beginning of Matthew chapter 1, it's the book of the Genesis of Jesus Christ, the Son of David. That this is a genesis of a new day. It's a new beginning. Just as Genesis chapter 1 was a beginning, this is a new beginning for humanity. Jesus has arrived for the purpose of redemption. J. Key Beale says this, Christ's death is not a redemption of all people without exception, but of all without distinction. So Jesus is the ultimate Christmas gift offered to all of humanity for anyone who will open it. Redemption is available to you. It's available to me. There is hope because Jesus came into the world. Merry Christmas to you.